I am delighted to be joined by the director and writer of Halloween Kills, David Gordon Green. Hello, David.
Hey, Mike.
David, tell me, it must be really difficult to come up with a Halloween sequel that gives everyone what they want, but also does something different, right? When you've got such a simple premise as Halloween, how did you approach making a sequel to your Halloween 2018 and doing something different and fresh with that format?
Well, if our previous chapter in 2018 was an opportunity to reconnect with fans of the original and invite new fans that were maybe less familiar with the original, and then our third chapter will be the conclusion of the Laurie Strode, Michael Myers saga as we see it. The middle chapter here with Halloween Kills is just kicking open the closet of the toy closet and just making a big mess and smashing shit and having a good time at the movies and not cleaning up our mess before we make a quick exit and await the third and final conclusion of the saga.
Love it. Is it difficult making a movie that you know is a middle chapter? So it's not a kind of self-contained story in its own right, I suppose.
For me, it's refreshing in a way because you don't need a lot of those devices of setup and payoff. You literally are we're just on the playground having a great time with our characters. We've brought some legacy characters back from the original film and are fleshing out some of the characters that we introduced in the 2018 film. And so we've got everyone there and just turn Haddonfield upside down for some mischief and mayhem.
And the original Halloween 2018, it felt like you were very much kind of throwing back to the 1978 version. There were kind of nods towards the original, right? Equally, this movie, even though you've erased Halloween 2 from 1981 from the timeline, it feels a little bit like you're nodding towards that Halloween 2, where we've got the night continues, Laurie goes to hospital. Tell me a little bit about that, about how much you wanted to draw from the original Halloween 2.
Well, when we decided we wanted to do something chronological in the timeline and pick up exactly where the last one left off, we had a lot of considerations that were similar to what Carpenter and his team had to think about in their Halloween 2. Mm-hmm. They created a device where Michael and Laurie were brother and sister, and we don't have that. We don't utilize that narrative, and so we had to have a different engine to drive those two characters, and we'd also written ourselves into a corner where he was trapped in a basement and she had a knife in the gut. So those two characters were going to inevitably go in two separate ways, and so our experience becomes, where do they go? And how do we see these character evolutions from two different sides of town, and how do they stir up everyone imaginable between the two?
Did you create a rod for your own back by removing the brother and sister connection? Because what you've got now is Michael and Laurie, who are two random strangers to each other almost, right? Except that obviously the fans want to see Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis, but to Michael, Laurie is just some random babysitter that he tried to kill 40 years ago, right? I mean, is there much more to it than that?
I don't think there's anything more to it than that. I think she's made it personal, but I don't think he doesn't have a specific target. He's just a kid trying to get home.
Yeah, and it must be really difficult to come up with stuff that you can do with a character like Michael Myers, who has so little to him, right? He's such a blank slate.
It is always a challenge because he gives you so little. You know, he's not there with a Hannibal Lecter monologue.
Yeah,
and he's not able to pull out a gun and he's not running at you with a chainsaw. He's got his very specific boundaries, and to me, that's the part of the challenge of putting this together is how do you make things fresh? We like to, as a fan of slasher movies, I like to invite cliches and tropes to some degree, but then you also have to do something new. And when, for an example, when we'd be discussing a particular kill scene, I remember raising my hand to the group of my co-writers and my department heads and saying, has anybody ever seen anybody get stabbed in the armpit before? And nobody could think of a reference. So then that becomes an exciting opportunity. And then, you and someone in your audience will say, oh, I've seen that before. And then I get to find a new good movie to watch.
What do you prefer when you're directing these horror set pieces? You know, is it more about the build up for you, the suspense in that kind of John Carpenter way? Or is it more about the money shot, about the blood, the gore, the kill itself?
That's debatable. And we debate that a lot on set. And even me and my editor debate that. Sometimes we always have footage that has the build up to the kill. And always. We normally have footage that is the build up that we can create tension and suspense, and we normally have gratuitous footage of the kill itself. And then sometimes we choose one path or the other. In Halloween Kills, it is not a movie that I would say is full of suspense and tension as much as it is aggression. We're saying something a little different. So a lot of that footage that we shot is not being used, although there's some, and there's sequences as, you know, Michael's stalking Lindsay Wallace through a park that feel more traditional in that type of a sequence. But then there's a lot more of him in explosive horror, and it's the balance of surprise and suspense, right? And which one you're going to utilize for that, and we go with surprise a lot in this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's no spoiler to say, right, that this is a movie filled with carnage, maybe the most carnage we've seen in a Halloween sequel, which again that's not what the original Halloween that John Carpenter made was all about, really, was it? But I guess you're contending with not just the legacy of Halloween, but the legacy of slasher movies in general, right? Slashers have changed a lot since John Carpenter's Halloween.
It's tricky, and if you were in our production meeting before we started shooting the film, I would have said, this is not a gratuitous, this is a violent movie and an aggressive movie, but it's not gratuitous and it's not gory. That changed while we were shooting it. And I don't know how much of it is that adrenaline that you get as a filmmaker where you're like, oh man, when his eyeballs pop out of his head, that looks awesome. Let's use that in the movie. Well, I do know that is what it is. That's exactly what it is.
Yes. And you mentioned at the beginning, obviously, we've got some returning characters in this movie. That was actually quite exciting, you know, and I think that's going to be really fun for Halloween fans, that we've got some of the characters, even played by some of the same actors, right, as the original, coming back here to reprise their roles. That must have been such a joy to kind of bring the gang back together.
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of the thrill of this chapter, is to be able to take these legacy characters that John Carpenter and Deborah Hill created in 1978. Those characters have been burned in my mind since I first saw the film, and then to take the seeds of characters that we introduced and established in 2018, and then to bring those worlds together and expand the Haddonfield universe was really fun. Just literally that reunion of this cast as we bring them together, and then study what their lives have been like for 40 years, and really with each of these actors we'd create those stories and what has happened to Tommy in the meantime that made him, you know, he was such a cute kid cowering in the corner when Laurie was babysitting him, and now he's pissed off and he's got a baseball bat and he's ready to kick somebody's ass.
Yeah, it feels like a very violent movie. It feels like quite an angry movie. I remember when Halloween 2018 came out, you did get a lot of criticism towards the film for it being very pro-gun, right? Whether or not that was deliberate, but that kind of, you know, what you'd done to Laurie's character and that kind of Linda Hamiltonification, I suppose, of her with all of her arsenal of weapons saving the day at the end. It feels, I don't know whether this is deliberate, but it feels like it kind of went the opposite way in Halloween Kills, where every time a character goes to use a gun, something really bad happens to them. It literally backfires, right? I just wondered, was that a kind of deliberate choice on your part? Was that a response to the criticisms of Halloween 2018?
No, and those are always tricky conversations to have, because I assume there is a responsibility as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, and things like that. But when you're in a horror genre, and one of the reasons I like it is I feel like it's a creative, emotional, expressive place to be. That's a release, and so any of that would be subconscious, because this is not a film with a message. But at the same time, I think the dialogue is smart. I think it's intelligent to bring conversations of how violence in movies affects real life, because it inevitably does. It desensitizes people in some way, and I'm not afraid of those conversations. But my intent is to make a movie that's just purely entertaining for us to eat popcorn to, and I don't go in there with a message, although you can. And I think genre is a wonderful place to hide politics and messages if you want to, but these movies are not about that, and subconsciously sometimes you do find yourself writing things that feel relevant or important, or the fact that this movie is about vigilante justice and mob mentality and things like that. Even though we made the film 2 years ago, it does seem to have found more of of an immediate cultural resonance. So it's hard to know. It's the chicken or the egg what it is, and is culture creating movies, or movies creating culture? And I think it's all of it. It's just all the beauty of that is that people can have conversations. They walk out of a movie, hopefully they've had a good time, but it's equally as important that the people that enjoy it have a conversation with the ones that don't, and that criticism is valid on both sides.
Yeah. So finally then, what can you tell me about Halloween Ends? You've written it, I presume, right? When does that go into production? Is there anything you can tell me about it?
It's written. I gave it to Carpenter 2 nights ago to get his notes on the new draft, and I feel really good about it. And until he throws me a curveball or an inspiration, I'll be excited to hear what he thinks. And we start shooting in January. I'm very excited about it. I think for me, it's the most personal of the 3 Halloween films that I've made. And I've got a very specific concept of it, but I also pride myself on being open to the opportunity and evolution as casting and realities and weather and culture start to permeate that production. We'll tell our story as it feels intuitively correct.
I love it. Well, I'm too late, unfortunately, but I wanted to pitch to you, David, my idea for Halloween Ends, which is to give us a multiverse extravaganza, right? Let's bring back different Lauries from different timelines, all of her different kids, Danielle Harris, Josh Hartnett. Let's bring back all the various different Michael Myers, the Cult of Thorn, and have them all come together in one big extravaganza to blow out the entire franchise. You know, that's my
I like
pitch
that.
to you.
That'll be for the animated series.
Yes. David Gordon Green, thank you so much for joining me.
Good talking to you.
Looking for more horror content? Subscribe now for more videos like this one, and listen to the Evolution of Horror podcast. Head on over to evolutionofhorror.com.